After the miscarriage, I got rid of every habit my police chief husband disliked. I no longer asked where he was going, even when he stayed out all night. I still slept peacefully. I was even injured during a narcotics operation. The doctor told me to notify my family, and I only answered calmly. I have no family. The nurse recognized me. You're Elias's wife, right? The captain is at the precinct next door. Do you need me to go inform him? I gently shook my head and said there was no need. And yet half an hour later, Elias still came. The man stood tall and straight, his voice cold and hard. Why didn't you contact me if you were hurt? I lowered my eyes. It's just a minor injury. There was no need to alarm the captain. My breezy tone for some reason made Elias irritated. He had just opened his mouth when the conversation of police officers outside drifted in through the door. Elias really dotes on Miss Ava. When Miss Ava twisted her ankle while singing at the nightclub, Elias directly called in a police car and personally carried her in and out, not even letting her feet touch the ground. Elias's heart suddenly tightened, but from the corner of his eye, he still could not help glancing at me, as if waiting for me to question him and make a scene like I used to. But not even my eyelashes trembled. I merely leaned quietly against the hospital bed, resting with my eyes closed. Chapter 1. It was not until I got into his police car that he finally explained in a low voice. Don't listen to their nonsense. I was just following procedure. Ava is a resident singer at a nightclub in my district. Since she got hurt, as the officer in charge of the area, of course I had to step in. I let out a soft mem and said nothing more. Elias suddenly flew into a rage. You don't believe me? Are you still throwing a tantrum at me? Lisa, I've already returned to the family. What more do you want? I looked out the window without turning my head. I believe you. I just thought I was fine, so I didn't bother you. Go back to the precinct dorm. That line again, perfunctory like an automatic reply. Elias slammed a fist into the steering wheel. The shrill blare of the horn split the silence, startling the nightclub staff across the street who had just finished their shift. One of the girls looked up. The moment the streetlight fell on her face, the air inside the car froze instantly. Ava, why is she here? Elias glanced at me instinctively, because every time I had seen her before, I would lose control of my emotions. But I merely gave her a faint glance, withdrew my gaze, and remained utterly calm. Elias tightened his grip on the steering wheel, but his eyes drifted toward her side. In the freezing winter night, the girl wore only a thin performance outfit, hugging her arms tightly, the tip of her nose red from the cold. His hand was already on the car door handle, and the worry in his eyes was almost spilling over. I understood immediately, pushed open the door, and conveniently gave him an out. If you need to patrol the district, I can walk back by myself. Before he could respond, I had already turned and walked toward the intersection. Elias chased after me and grabbed my wrist. There's been nothing between me and her for a long time. I didn't know she'd be here either. Why don't you believe me? I nodded. I believe you. It's not easy for a girl to make a living, even if it's over. It's normal to still care a little. I understand. Elias stared at my face. There was no expression on it. Nothing like I was acting out in anger. He felt that everything was wrong. In the past, my urge to share and my possessiveness had both been overwhelming. Even if I found a single long hair on his police uniform, I would question him until deep into the night. Now I was exactly what he had always wanted: quiet, obedient, considerate. But inside him, it felt as though waterlogged cotton had been stuffed into his chest, so heavy and stifling he could hardly breathe. I pulled my hand back and turned to leave. When I reached the corner, I stopped, turned around, and looked back. Beside the police car, Elias had already taken off his coat and draped it over Ava's shoulders. He cupped her face in his hands and lowered his head to kiss her deeply. I was not surprised at all. In fact, I should have expected it long ago, and I would never again be like I was the first time I discovered his affair. When I questioned him like a madwoman, Elias, have you no shame? I've been with you since I was 18, from having nothing to everything we have now, and you're telling me you've fallen in love with someone else? At that time, after I scratched him until he bled, he sneered and said, You want to talk about shame? If you had any shame, would you have been with me at 18? Your parents didn't want you. I was the one who took you out of the orphanage and raised you for more than 10 years. You should be grateful to me. Those words were like a poisoned dagger, shattering the more than 10 years we had spent risking our lives together and fighting side by side. The vibration of my phone dragged me out of my memories. Comrade Lisa, all the relics and pension procedures for your biological parents have now been fully approved. When would it be convenient for you to come to the Harbor City precinct to handle them? I pulled down my sleeve to cover the scar on my wrist. 10 days from now. There are still 10 days left in the approval process for my divorce application. The person on the other end paused. It hasn't been easy being with Elias for so many years. As for inheriting the estate and the honors, you don't necessarily have to transfer out of your original police unit. I looked at the city lights streaking past outside the window and answered calmly. I don't love him anymore. I just want to leave this place forever. When I returned to the precinct dorm, I pushed open the door and immediately saw the wedding photo on the wall. The man in the picture was smiling brightly, his nose affectionately brushing against my temple. That was when we loved each other most. Chapter 2. Elias and I both grew up in an orphanage. When I was 18, the director wanted to sell me off to an old bachelor in the mountains. It was Elias who grabbed my hand and pulled me over the wall to escape the orphanage. The director shouted furiously behind us, "Elias, if you've got the guts, then protect her for the rest of her life." He turned back, his eyes shining with reckless determination. "Then I'll protect her for life." He used the compensation money left by his parents to rent the cheapest one-story room in the urban village, then ran off to sign up at the precinct. "Once I get into the police force and earn enough merit, I'll be able to arrange a transfer for you. When that time comes, no one will be able to send you away." For 3 years as a rookie, he fought desperately in the major crimes unit. Every time before carrying out a dangerous mission, he would tuck my photo into the pocket over his chest. I worked a clerical job in the police department, saving every cent from my meager salary. At our hardest point, the two of us could not even scrape together 10 yuan, and we split one bowl of instant noodles for New Year's. Later, he entered the special police unit, and I transferred to the intelligence analysis division. We moved from that one-story room into a single-person dorm, and then from the dorm into a police apartment. The rank insignia on Elias's shoulder kept rising higher and higher, and the colleagues around him also began to come in all shapes and types. Until one day, on the inside of the collar of his police uniform, I found a trace of lipstick that did not belong to me. That girl twisted her ankle. I helped her to the backstage area and accidentally got it on me. He tugged irritably at his collar. "Lisa, you're a police officer too. Can you stop being so paranoid all day long? Do police officers never betray anyone?" "Elias, we said we'd be together for a lifetime, not one day less." We began to fight endlessly. I checked his mission logs, checked his communication records, and even secretly sneaked to the outside of the precinct when he claimed he was working overtime. As if out of spite, Elias really did start cheating. The women around him changed one after another, and at his worst, he deliberately showed me the scratch marks on his back to provoke me. "Satisfied now?" he sneered. "Weren't you going to investigate? Well, now you found it." I felt like a madwoman. I knew I should let go, but I could not do it. After more than 10 years, Elias and I had already grown into each other's flesh and blood. If we separated, it would be bloody and torn apart. If we stayed together, we would go on torturing each other. But a year ago, he suddenly settled down. He abruptly changed, cut off all the women around him, and kept only one young girl by his side. I had someone investigate, and the instant I saw Ava's photograph, I broke down. Chapter 3. The face in that photograph looked strikingly like the pure and clear version of me at 18. Elias would rather love a stand-in for me than love me again. That night, I lay in the bathtub and slit my wrist. When Elias broke down the door, even his fingers were trembling. He carried me into the police hospital, his eyes so red it was frightening. "Lisa, have you lost your mind? Let's live properly together. I promise. From now on there will only be you. I'll never see anyone else again." Lying in the hospital bed, I only felt tired, so tired that I could not even cry. And it was also on that day that the senior officers of the police force came to see me and handed me a yellowed file. "Officer Lisa, the organization has re-examined the list of personnel who died in the Harbor City anti-drug operation that year. Among the 2 martyrs, they should be your biological parents." I held that file in my hands, my fingertips icy cold. After hanging up the call from the police force, I walked to the window as if possessed. In the garden downstairs, Elias was holding Ava tightly in his arms. I'm sorry, Ava. Her emotions are unstable, and she also has psychological trauma after her missions. I can't leave her at a time like this. But believe me, once her condition stabilizes, I'll definitely give you an explanation. The two of them kissed so reluctantly and passionately, like a pair of star-crossed lovers. At that moment, I felt the connected flesh between us being torn apart, ripped open into a gaping hole, and the pain was so intense I could not even make a sound. On the 7th day of lying in that hospital bed, I suddenly understood everything. I was going to leave Elias and sever all of this with my own hands. Chapter 4. For 7 days in a row, Elias never returned to the precinct dorm. I did not ask any questions. I simply submitted the divorce application and transfer request according to procedure, and started sorting through my personal belongings. The first temporary dorm room we had been assigned back then had now sat vacant for many years. I decided to return it to the logistics department. When I arrived at the unit entrance with the logistics officer, I found the door half open. Inside came a woman's flirtatious laughter and a man's suppressed breathing. Through the crack in the door, Ava's nightclub costume was scattered across the floor. Elias had her pinned against the wall, his uniform trousers pulled down to his knees, thrusting hard into her, on the hand gripping her waist. The ring finger still wore our wedding band. I clenched my palm so hard it hurt, slowly let out a breath, and pulled the door shut. Then I turned to the logistics officer and said, "Sorry. Today isn't convenient for inventory. Another day." The officer was a young policewoman. She had heard the sounds inside too. She looked at me, her expression complicated. "Major Lisa, do you need to report this to the higher-ups?" I shook my head. "No need. This is a personal matter. There's no need to trouble the organization. What would be the point of barging in? To fight like a shrew, or to cry like a bitter abandoned wife about all the years we had fought side by side? There was no meaning in it. A man whose heart had long since been given to someone else would still be nothing but an empty shell, even if I dragged him back." I hurried downstairs, only to be grabbed by the wrist by Elias, who had rushed out after me. His breathing had not settled, and his collar was crooked. "Why are you here? Just now. What did you hear?" I pulled my hand back, my face calm. I was passing by to submit the room return request. The door wasn't open, so I left. He visibly relaxed, thinking I was simply feeling sentimental. "I've been out on assignment this week. I only got back today." Ava said she wanted a place to rest, so I lent her the key. "Don't overthink it." I could not be bothered to expose such a clumsy excuse, and turned to leave. Suddenly, a huge crash of shattering glass came from inside the room, followed immediately by flames surging up. Elias's face changed drastically. He grabbed my chin, and a terrifying fury burned in his eyes. "You did this? Lisa, I thought you had really figured things out. I never expected you to use a trick like this. I'm telling you, I approved Ava to stay here temporarily. If anything happens to her, the disciplinary department will come after you first." He flung me aside and turned, rushing straight into the fire. I was about to leave, but then I suddenly remembered the notarized documents for my divorce report and my parents' relics were still locked in the old safe in that room. I snatched the fire extinguisher from the corridor, smashed the glass, and climbed in through the window against the wave of heat. Inside, thick smoke billowed everywhere. Elias was already carrying Ava and rushing out. When he saw me, his eyes turned icy. "What are you coming in here to add to the chaos for?" I ignored him and ran straight for the bedroom. The flames had already climbed up the curtains, and the safe was right beside the burning wardrobe. "Lisa, are you insane? Get out now!" Elias roared from the doorway. I threw myself in front of the safe and spun the code. The instant the safe door sprang open, the burning chandelier overhead came crashing down with a deafening roar. Elias instinctively threw himself over Ava to shield her and retreated backward. The shockwave hurled me to the ground. Shards of glass sliced through my skin, and blood instantly soaked through my clothes. Gritting my teeth, I yanked out the document pouch and clutched it tightly to my chest. Smoke choked deep into my lungs, and my vision gradually blurred. Before my consciousness sank into darkness, all I could hear were Elias's footsteps as he carried Ava out, and the faint sound of police sirens in the distance. Chapter 5. When I woke up again, I was already lying in a hospital room at the police hospital. Elias was opening the document pouch I had risked my life to protect. Inside were 2 red booklets. Our marriage certificates? You nearly got yourself killed just to get these? His voice tightened. Lisa, your left leg has a fracture, and you have inhalation lung damage. You almost didn't make it. I reached out and took the pouch back. Without the marriage certificates, how was I supposed to submit the divorce report to the political department? Elias looked at me, clutching the pouch tightly, his brows drawn together. All 3 of us would have been fine, and yet you just had to pull something this ridiculous, forcing me to choose between the 2 of you to prove whether you were the most important one? Arson is a serious disciplinary violation. I saved Ava first because she had no protection at all, while you had emergency response training. I stared at the white ceiling of the hospital room and gave a faint mem. Lisa, his tone softened as he tried to explain. Since I've already decided to return to the family, I won't have any more entanglements with Ava. Ava, her family is in difficulty. I've only been helping in the name of the organization and arranging temporary housing for her. Ava was having a hard time, and he helped her all the way into his bed. He kept saying he was returning to the family, but his body was still drawn to youthful, vibrant flesh. I finally lifted my eyes to look at him. My eyes were like dead water, utterly still, strangely calm. I know, I understand. He was about to go mad from that calm. He suddenly stood up, but then his gaze caught the large burn wounds on my arm. Lisa, wasn't one injury enough? Do you need more injuries to tie me down? No more. I won't be stupid again. He still wanted to say something, but then his encrypted communicator rang. He quickly walked to the window to answer it. I could not hear clearly what was being said, only vaguely catching Ava's tearful voice. Elias spoke a few low words of instruction, then turned to look at me. There's an urgent matter with the mission review. I need to go to police headquarters. Focus on healing properly. With that, he turned and left. For the next few days, I stayed quietly in the police hospital. Elias sent people with nutritional supplements and flowers, and the internal line rang every day as well. I always had the nurse on duty answer it, saying only, "Her condition is stable, no visitation needed." On the day I was discharged, I went alone on crutches to settle the bill. I had just handed over the paperwork when an old lady shoved me aside. "My son-in-law is one of the leaders here. Let me go first." I frowned. "Please wait in line." The old lady shot me a sideways glance. "Which department are you from?" "My son-in-law is Superintendent Elias. If you delay me from getting my medicine, can you take responsibility for it?" Before she had even finished speaking, Elias came hurrying down the corridor with Ava. He pulled me aside and lowered his voice. "Ava's mother has a bad heart. She mustn't get agitated. You're a police officer. You should give way to civilians." Ava supported her wheezing mother, her eyes rimmed red. "Sister Lisa, I'm sorry. My mom's old illness flared up. I was afraid she wouldn't agree to use the expensive medicine, so I told her Elias was my boyfriend. Please don't blame him. He just has a soft heart and can't bear to see an old person suffer." I quietly looked at the 3 of them in front of me. So Ava's mother got sick, and he left me there in the hospital alone, with a fractured leg and burn injuries? Chapter 6. Forget it. None of it matters anymore. I nodded and turned to leave. I had only taken 2 steps when I heard Ava's soft voice, thick with tears. "Elias, is Sister Lisa angry? Will she be like last time again? I'm really afraid of affecting your future." Elias's voice was very light, but it still came through clearly. "Don't overthink it. She grew up without parents, so she can't understand how you feel." My fingers tightened suddenly around the crutch, my knuckles turning white, as I made my way step by step through the hospital corridor. Elias's footsteps came chasing after me from behind. "Lisa, I'll take you back to the police compound." I did not turn around. Instead, I quickened my pace. Suddenly, the crutch slipped, and I crashed to the ground. Blood started seeping out again from the burn on my arm. The fall was too hard. It felt as if something inside my chest had shattered completely. I clenched my teeth, my nails digging into my palm, but my tears still rolled down out of control. Ever since I was little, I had been most afraid of holidays and festivals. Watching the warm light spilling from other people's windows, hearing the laughter coming from inside, That kind of envy was like a dull knife carving into flesh. Elias knew better than anyone that this was the deepest scar I carried. And now, just to soothe Ava, he was tearing that scar open again and again with his own hands. He rushed over and lifted me into his arms, anger suppressed in his voice. Lisa, do you have to force yourself like this? Before he could finish speaking, a thermos bucket came flying through the air. Scalding soup splashed all over my face, and my forehead quickly swelled into a dark bruise. Ava's mother stood a few steps away, trembling with rage. You shameless thing, seducing my son-in-law? I'll teach you what happens when you seduce him. She rushed over and slapped me. The blow knocked my head to the side, and I fell to the ground. Then the crutch came down heavily on my shoulder. There was a dull thud as it struck bone. Elias grabbed the crutch just as Ava's mother was about to swing it down again. Ma'am, please calm down. It's not what you think. Then what is it? Ava's mother screamed. That little vixen threw herself into your arms. Do you think I'm blind? I braced myself against the ground and stood up. Control your daughter. We all know exactly who the mistress is. But Elias suddenly turned back, and in a hurried whisper that only the two of us could hear, said, she has severe coronary heart disease. She can't take stimulation. Lisa, I'm begging you, please don't make a scene at a time like this. After saying that, he quickly steadied Ava's mother. You've misunderstood. This officer is my colleague. She suffered psychological trauma during a previous mission, so her emotions are somewhat unstable. He even pulled a page from my medical record out of his pocket. Ava's mother glanced at it and spat. She became mentally ill from being a cop? No wonder her parents died early. No one ever taught her any manners. Half supporting and half dragging her away, Elias left with Ava's mother. From beginning to end, he never once turned back to look at me. I sat on the ground, looking at their retreating figures, unable even to cry anymore. Chapter 7. The kind head nurse helped me back to the treatment room and redressed my wounds. Major, she asked carefully, do you need to notify the security department? I shook my head. No, please process my discharge. When I returned to the precinct dorm, I began packing my luggage. My phone vibrated, and the screen lit up. Ava had posted a new update. In the photo, she was wearing Elias's police jacket and leaning against his chest, with the caption, after weathering all the storms, I found you. No matter how much it hurt, it was worth it. I calmly swiped past the screen and tapped unfollow. Downstairs, the car a police officer had called for me had already arrived. After getting in, I gave the destination, Harbor City International Airport. The car started and drove out through the gate of the precinct dorm. Just then, a black police car drove straight toward us and brushed past our vehicle. The rear window was half lowered. Elias was turned sideways, speaking to the person beside him. Ava was leaning against his shoulder, smiling like a flower in bloom. The two cars sped away in opposite directions. In the rearview mirror, the precinct gate grew farther and farther away, until it finally shrank into a single dot. Elias. This time, it is really over between us. By the time the flight landed at Sea City International Airport, it was already deep into the night. I pulled my suitcase down the boarding stairs, and the cold wind carrying unfamiliar damp air hit me full in the face. Officer Lisa. In the distance, an older police officer with graying temples strode toward me, the insignia on his epaulets glowing softly under the lights. He stopped in front of me, raised his hand, and gave me a standard police salute. I'm Diego, Deputy Commissioner of the Sea City Police Department. His voice was steady and powerful. Your father, Nestor, was my classmate at the police academy. Your mother, Zoe, was personally recruited by me into the anti-drug unit. I stood at attention and returned the salute, but something seemed lodged in my throat. Deputy Commissioner, call me Uncle. Chapter 8. He lowered his hand, his gaze falling on my face as he studied me carefully. His eyes slightly red. You look like them. So much like them, especially your eyes. They are exactly like your mother's. He took my luggage and led me toward the airport exit. Come on. Let's go home first. The house your parents left behind has been maintained by the organization all these years. The car drove deep into the police compound and stopped in front of a small red brick building. In the courtyard stood an old banyan tree, with a stone table and stone benches beneath it. Diego said that when my mother was pregnant with me, she often sat there reading. When your parents died, you were only 3 months old. He pushed open the door. The furnishings inside still retained the style of the 1980s. At the time, the situation was urgent. They entrusted you to a local villager and said that if they didn't come back, the child should be sent to the nearest orphanage. On the wall hung their photographs in police uniform. My father had sharp brows and bright eyes. My mother wore a gentle smile. Below the photos were 2 first-class merit medals displayed side by side. The organization searched for you for many years. Diego's voice was low. Later, that villager moved away, and the trail went cold. It wasn't until last year, when old archives were being sorted, that they found the orphanage's Lisa, whose age and blood type both matched. I stood in front of the photographs and raised my hand to lightly touch the cold glass of the frame. How did they die? The Sea City anti-drug battle. Diego walked to the window and looked out into the night. Your father led a small team to hold the rear and pinned down the main force of the traffickers. Your mother was an undercover officer at the time. In order to send back critical intelligence to the rear, she risked going deeper into the drug den and was unfortunately exposed and killed. They both originally had a chance to withdraw. He turned to look at me, but your father said that every extra minute he held on gave the main force 1 more minute of survival. Your mother said that intelligence was more important than life. The room was very quiet, with only the ticking of the old-fashioned wall clock. Lisa, Diego said solemnly, you now have 2 choices. One is to inherit their honors and pension, transfer out of police service, and live a stable life. The other is to remain in the force and continue walking the path your parents were forced to leave unfinished. I did not hesitate. I choose the second path. He smiled and patted my shoulder. Good, as expected of Nestor and Zoe's daughter. Chapter 9. Life at Harbor City Police Department felt as if someone had pressed a reset button. I was assigned to the Intelligence Investigation Division and started over from the grassroots level as a staff officer. No one here knew about my past with Elias, and no one knew I had once tried to kill myself over love. My colleagues only saw me as a female officer transferred from another city, quiet but highly capable at her job. By day, I handled intelligence work. At night, I studied how to operate new equipment. On weekends, I stayed at the shooting training center for an entire day at a time. Diego found me the best instructor. Your mother was among the first batch of female narcotics officers in the city. He said, you can't disgrace her. 3 months later, I took part in my first undercover operation. The moment I successfully infiltrated and helped destroy a drug den, I suddenly thought of my mother. When she carried out her undercover mission back then, was it just as thrilling and dangerous? After the mission ended, the instructor patted my shoulder and smiled. Lisa, you were born for this line of work. That night, I placed a bouquet of white chrysanthemums in front of my parents' graves. Their gravestone bore their birth and death years, along with a line engraved beneath, this life was devoted to the nation. This heart was given to my love. I raised my hand in salute and said softly, Dad, Mom, I'm back. Chapter 10. Elias came to Harbor City Police Department half a year later. That day, I was doing combat drills at the training center when the duty staff officer came running over and said, Major, there's a Superintendent Elias at the gate asking for you. He says he's your husband. I took off my helmet. Tell him I'm training and don't have time. He says it's urgent. About the divorce procedures. I was silent for a few seconds. Take him to the visitor's room. When I pushed open the door to the visitor's room, Elias was standing with his back to the entrance, facing the window. Hearing the sound, he turned around sharply. After half a year apart, he had grown much thinner, and the shadows under his eyes were so heavy they seemed impossible to dissolve. His police uniform hung on him so loosely that it looked almost empty. Lisa, his voice was terribly hoarse. I closed the door and sat down on the sofa farthest away from him. Superintendent Elias. The divorce application should already have been approved. If it's a matter of procedure, please contact the political department. I didn't sign. He quickly walked over and crouched down in front of me, looking up at me. Lisa, I didn't sign it. We're still husband and wife. If a couple has lived apart for 2 full years, the marriage can be dissolved unilaterally. I looked at him calmly. We've been separated for half a year already. I was wrong. He grabbed my hand, his fingers icy cold. Lisa, I was really wrong. I've already taken care of Ava's matter. She and her mother have already left the police district. I also investigated that burned house. She accidentally knocked over the alcohol stove herself. So? I pulled my hand back. Elias, are you here to tell me that back then I misunderstood you? No, that's not what I mean. He shook his head in panic. I understand now how awful I was back then. Give me one more chance. Can we start over? I stood up and walked to the window. Outside was the training field of Harbor City Police Department. The new officers were doing night drills, and their shouted slogans drifted over faintly. Elias, I said without turning around. Do you still remember the first mission we carried out side by side? He froze. Border narcotics suppression. You led the assault team, and I handled intelligence support. I continued. The night before the operation, you said to me, Lisa, if I don't make it back tomorrow, find a good man and marry him. Don't wait for me. I said, Elias, if you dare not come back, I'll chase you all the way to the king of hell and drag you back myself. Later, you were shot. The bullet was only 3 centimeters from your heart. I waited outside the operating room all night and swore that as long as you survived, I would ask for nothing else. I only wanted you alive. I turned around and looked at him. Back then, I thought what we had was a bond forged through life and death. Something heavier than love and closer than blood. But later I realized it wasn't. I shook my head. To you, I was just a habit. You were used to having me by your side. Used to a light waiting for you at home. Used to someone who would never leave you. So you could hurt me again and again, because you knew that no matter what you did, I would forgive you. Elias, I said softly, a person's heart can die. He staggered to his feet, his eyes red-rimmed. I didn't not love you. I just got used to it. Habit is more frightening than not loving someone. I cut him off. If you stop loving someone, at least that's honest. But if you've simply grown used to them and still pretend it's deep love, that's worse. There was a knock on the visitor's room door, and the duty staff officer stuck his head in. Major, Deputy Commissioner Diego is looking for you. I'll be right there, I said, as I reached the doorway. Elias called after me. Lisa, if I had chosen you back then, if during that fire, the one I protected had been you, I stopped walking, but I did not turn back. There are no ifs, Elias. The moment you chose to protect her, it was over between us. The door closed softly behind me. The corridor lights were bright, illuminating the road ahead in perfect clarity. Chapter 11. 3 more months passed, and Diego asked to speak with me. There's a mission from above. It's very dangerous, but very important. He pushed a top-secret file toward me. We need someone to infiltrate a drug trafficker's stronghold and obtain a critical piece of intelligence. You're the most suitable candidate, but you may refuse. After reading the file, I looked up. I'll go. Have you thought it through? His gaze was grave. This isn't like the previous ones. There's a good chance you won't come back. I've thought it through, I said. My parents didn't plan on coming back either. On the night before departure, I went to the narcotics unit for one final check. As I passed the honors room, I saw the lights still on inside. When I pushed the door open, Diego was standing in front of my parents' photograph, gently wiping the frame. Uncle. He turned back to look at me and smiled. You came to say goodbye to your parents? We stood side by side, looking at the young faces of my parents in the photograph. When your mother was 7 months pregnant with you, she still insisted on carrying out missions. Diego suddenly spoke. We all urged her to suspend duty and wait for maternity leave. But she said, what if an emergency mission comes up? If there's one less officer, dozens more colleagues may have to die. Later, she really was assigned in a crisis. She carried out the mission while injured, and she completed it. He turned to look at me. After the mission was over, her water broke. You were born in the police infirmary. My eyes grew hot. Lisa, Diego said solemnly, come back safe. Your parents are watching from heaven. I will. I raised my hand in salute. For them, and for this land they protected with their lives. Chapter 12. The mission was even harder than expected. I stayed undercover in the drug trafficker's stronghold for 17 days and brushed past death 3 times. When I finally obtained the intelligence, My position was exposed, and I was surrounded in a mountain valley. I had run out of bullets. My right shoulder had been shot, and blood had soaked through half my body. Leaning against a boulder, I opened the encrypted communicator, preparing to send the final intelligence. Then I thought of many people. I thought of the lonely street lamp outside the orphanage, of the new year when Elias and I shared one bowl of instant noodles, of him kneeling beside my hospital bed saying, "I only want you," and also of his back as he carried Ava out of the fire. At last, I thought of my parents. I thought of the words engraved on their gravestone, "This life was devoted to the nation. This heart was given to my love." I pressed the send button. The instant the intelligence was transmitted, the pursuers were already in front of me. I gripped my last grenade tightly. The pull ring hooked around my finger. Just then, the roar of a helicopter came from the sky, our rescue helicopter. Then came an even denser burst of gunfire from behind the enemy. Our support team had arrived. By the time my comrades rushed in and lifted me up, my consciousness was already fading. I only remember someone shouting in my ear, "Hold on, Lisa!" The deputy commissioner gave the order, "You must be brought home." I smiled, then closed my eyes. This time, someone finally came to take me home. Chapter 13. When I woke up again, I was already in the police hospital in Harbor City. Diego was keeping watch by my bedside, his eyes bloodshot from exhaustion. "You're awake." His voice trembled. "You little girl, you nearly scared your uncle to death." I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. "Don't talk. Your windpipe was injured." He pressed me back gently. "The mission was completed. The intelligence was critical. Headquarters awarded you a first-class merit citation." He took out a medal and placed it in my palm. "The same honor your parents received." He said, "Lisa, you did it." The sunlight outside the window was beautiful, pouring through the glass in warm rays. It was only later that I learned that during that operation, Elias's unit had been training just 300 kilometers away. He had applied to join the rescue mission, but headquarters rejected him because he was emotionally unstable. Diego said it flatly. "A person who can't even handle his own feelings properly is not suited for a mission like that." The day I was discharged, I received a package mailed from another city. Inside were 2 divorce certificates and a note. There were only 3 words on it: "I'm sorry." I fed the note into the shredder. Everything in the past was just like that note, ground into powder and scattered with the wind. 3 years later, I became the youngest female senior colonel in the Harbor City Police Department. At the promotion ceremony, Diego personally pinned the insignia onto my shoulders. Thunderous applause erupted below the stage, and camera flashes lit up the room. When the ceremony ended, I went alone to my parents' grave. I placed a bouquet of white chrysanthemums down and raised my hand in salute. "Dad, Mom," I said softly, "your daughter didn't let you down." The wind passed through the cemetery, and the pines and cypresses swayed gently, as if answering me. As I turned to leave, I saw someone standing under a tree in the distance. Elias. He looked at me from afar, without coming closer. I only glanced at him once, then withdrew my gaze and walked toward the car waiting not far away. Before getting in, I looked back at the cemetery one last time. The sunlight was perfect, and the years were peaceful, just as they had hoped before they died. The car started and drove toward a new mission, a new journey, and this time, I was no longer alone.